Right, so Robert, the time is 8:44.
Yeah.
All right. I'm arrested on suspicion of murder of Dawn Rhodes on the 2nd of June 2016. This is a rearrest of an offence for which you were charged in a questioning court in 2017. All right. We have the power to arrest you on suspicion of this murder from the Director of Public Prosecutions, who has given his consent to reinvestigate the murder under double jeopardy provisions.
There was a man in the UK who once stood in court, accused of killing his wife, and he walked free. At the time, the jury believed it was an incident that happened in self-defense, and the prison doors did not close behind him. But what's hard to believe is this. Almost 10 years later, that same man was brought back to court. This time, he was no longer the one who got away. He was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. So what caused a case that seemed finished to reopen all over again? This is the case of Robert Rhodes, one of the rare cases in the UK linked to a unique legal principle known as double jeopardy. Every detail in this video is based on publicly available information, with no speculation and no added embellishment. Robert Rhodes was a 52-year-old man who worked as a carpenter. To many people around him, he didn't seem particularly loud, dramatic, or attention-seeking. Not the kind of person you'd immediately associate with something serious and life-changing. But sometimes it's exactly that sense of ordinary that makes a story more unsettling, because tragedy doesn't always come with obvious warning signs. The woman at the center of this story was Dawn Rhodes, Robert's wife. According to publicly available information, the couple were living separately, and their relationship had reached a breaking point. Dawn was not just a name linked to a headline. She was a mother, a woman with her own life, her own relationships, and her own choices. And when a devastating incident happens inside a family, the impact rarely stops with one person. It ripples outward, leaving long-lasting consequences for everyone left behind. In the period leading up to what happened, Robert and Dawn's marriage was described as increasingly strained. Without turning it into sensational drama, it's important to recognize that many family tragedies begin in familiar, everyday ways. A pattern of arguments that never truly ends. Mistrust that builds quietly over time. A sense of betrayal, or a need for control that slowly crosses the line. And when those tensions build up behind closed doors, it can create a situation where one moment changes everything. With a marriage that was already strained and a relationship reportedly close to breaking point, the days leading up to early June 2016 were far from peaceful. When trust begins to weaken and emotions build up over time, even an ordinary day can become tense, especially in a household where two people no longer feel like partners. The events in this case unfolded in Red Hill, Surrey, a quiet town in a county often seen as calm and largely residential. Surrey is well known for its commuter communities, places where many people travel into London for work and return home expecting stability and routine. It is not the kind of setting most people would associate with violent crime, and that is part of what makes this story so unsettling. But on Zosukuda June 2016, that sense of normality disappeared. On that day, Dawn Rhodes was found deceased at the family home. Public information reports that she had been attacked with a knife and did not survive. It is a simple but devastating fact, because nothing about it feels distant or unreal. This did not happen in a dark alleyway or during a random encounter. It happened inside a place that should have been private, familiar, and safe. At this point, many people might assume the tragedy ended there, a relationship breaking down, and then reaching a fatal outcome. But in this case, what happened afterwards would become just as significant as what happened on that day. Because this story was not only about the loss of Dawn Rhodes, it also became about the actions taken afterwards, the decisions made following the violence, and the way events were later presented. And those were the choices Robert Rhodes made next, that made this case stand out, and ultimately set it on a path that very few cases in the UK have ever taken. And this is where the case takes a turn that many people find difficult to process. In the aftermath of what happened inside that home in Redhill, Robert Rhodes did not simply describe events as they were. Instead, he put forward a version of events that framed him as acting in self-defense, a claim that at the time helped shape how the situation was viewed. And for a while, that story worked. It created doubt, it created questions, and it gave him space to present himself as someone who had been forced into an extreme situation. But the problem was this: the story did not stand on its own. It came alongside actions that, according to later public reporting, looked less like panic and more like a deliberate attempt to construct a narrative. One of the most disturbing elements was the allegation that Rhodes injured himself in the aftermath. This was not described as an accident. It was presented as something done intentionally, the kind of act that leaves marks behind, the kind of proof that can make an account sound more believable. It is a known tactic in cases where someone wants to appear as though they were also harmed, as though there was a struggle, as though the situation unfolded in a way that justifies their version of events. But even that was not the part that left the deepest impact. Because according to what later emerged, Rhodes went further, far beyond what most people would ever imagine. Reports state that he caused injury to his own child, to the child's arm, to support the story being told. Some accounts suggest the child required medical treatment, and that is the moment many people struggle to understand. Not only because of the cruelty of it, but because it turns a child into something else entirely. A tool, a prop, a piece of evidence used to strengthen a lie. In many cases, someone may try to cover up wrongdoing. But in this case, the reported actions suggest something darker: the willingness to involve a child directly and to place that child at the center of a fabricated version of events. And then comes the psychological weight of it all. Because it wasn't just about what happened physically, it was about what that child was expected to do afterwards: to stay quiet, to repeat a version of events, and to carry that story for years. When a child is pressured into silence or pushed into accepting an adult's narrative as truth, it becomes a kind of captivity without bars. The child may still go to school, still eat dinner, still smile in public, but inside they are trapped by something they did not choose. And years later, that became the very thing that caused the case to resurface. Because sometimes the truth doesn't disappear. It waits. It grows heavier. And eventually, it finds a way out. For Robert Rhodes, it wasn't only about avoiding consequences. It was about rewriting reality itself. For a time, it appeared the story had reached its ending. In 2017, Robert Rhodes stood trial and was found not guilty. From the outside, the case seemed settled. Public attention moved on, and for many people it looked as though there would be no further developments. So how did something this serious result in an acquittal? At that point, the jury accepted the defense approach based on the account Rhodes put forward. His explanation introduced uncertainty about how the incident unfolded, and in a UK courtroom, uncertainty matters. The legal threshold is not what seems likely or what feels true. It is proof beyond reasonable doubt. If the prosecution cannot remove that doubt completely, the law requires the jury to return a not guilty verdict. That is why the 2017 outcome carried such weight. It didn't necessarily answer every question, but it did mean the evidence presented at the time was not enough to meet the standard needed for a conviction. And for most cases, that would be the end of it. However, this case would later take an extremely rare direction. Not because of rumor, not because of public pressure, but because information emerged that fundamentally changed what could be proven. And once that happened, the case was no longer frozen in 2017. It became a case that could be reopened and re-examined in a way that is almost unheard of. To understand why this case returned years later, it helps to explain one key principle in UK law in a simple way. In most situations, once a person has been found not guilty, they cannot be put on trial again for the same offence. This is commonly known as double jeopardy. The purpose of this rule is to give finality, so someone is not forced to face trial after trial for the same allegation. But there is a rare exception. If new and compelling evidence comes to light, evidence that was not available the first time, and evidence strong enough to change what can realistically be proven, the courts may allow the case to be reopened. This doesn't happen often. The threshold is high, and it requires strict legal approval. But the rule exists for situations where key information emerges years later. In the Robert Rhodes case, public reporting has stated that a major part of the new evidence came from the couple's child. Years after the events in 2016, the child, who was very young at the time, later gave information to authorities, describing what they remembered and what they had been through. In other words, the child spoke up. The child provided an account that had not been fully heard before, and that became central to why the case was looked at again. And that detail is important because children do not always speak when adults expect them to. Some stay silent out of fear, some stay silent because they feel pressured, and some stay silent simply because, at a young age, they do not fully understand what has happened around them. But as time passes, their understanding changes. What once felt impossible to say can become something they can no longer keep inside. And when that happens, the truth can return in a way no one expects, strong enough to reopen a case that once seemed finished and set it on a path almost no one saw coming. By late 2025, the case returned to court for a retrial. This time, the evidence was not the same as it had been years earlier. New information had emerged, and the overall picture presented to the jury was no longer the one they had been asked to consider in 2017. After hearing the case, the jury reached a clear verdict. Robert Rhodes was found guilty of murder. It was a complete reversal from the earlier outcome, and it marked the moment the case fully shifted direction. Sentencing followed on 16th of January 2026. The court imposed a life sentence, with a minimum term of 29 years and 6 months before he can be considered for release. Alongside the murder conviction, Rhodes was also convicted of additional offenses linked to the account he gave and the steps taken afterwards, including 2 counts of perjury, perverting the course of justice, and child cruelty. And with that, a case that once appeared closed was given a final legal outcome, nearly a decade after it began. The Robert Rhodes case is a reminder that justice does not always arrive quickly, and sometimes the truth takes years to surface. A case that once seemed closed can return when new information emerges, and when someone finally finds the courage to speak. It also shows how lasting the impact of family trauma can be, especially when a child is caught in the middle of events far beyond their control. If you'd like me to continue this series on rare UK cases that were reopened and retried years later, comment UK below. And if you want the next video to focus on another case with a shocking legal twist, tell me which one you want to hear next.